That's right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movies. And we got, I don't want to say a banger of a show, although I think it's going to be a great show. It is a great film. We are going to be talking about The Zone of Interest. But before we get into that, let's bring on my co-host with the most, my Borscht bro, Mr. Jim Chaboyko. How you doing, my friend?
Great. Celebrating St. Patrick's Day in a traditional way, wearing an old green T-shirt and talking about dour movies.
with what one always would wear something about a beer.
Yes, exactly. My pub crawling team. I bought this thing at like Old Navy for $2 about 15 years ago. So I drag it out once a year without laundering it, I'm sure. So.
Oh, all right. Well, Mr. Chaboyko, on that note,
Yes.
yeah, okay, I'm going to give everyone out there the log line I wrote for this flick. Auschwitz Commandant Rudolf Höss, his wife Hedwig, and their young family's middle-class good life in the so-called zone of interest around the Auschwitz camp is threatened when there is talk of transferring them back to HQ in Oranienburg. Jim, does that sound right to you?
Yeah. Very much so. And then sort of the inner workings, the day-to-day workings of the household. But that's the primary thrust of it, I would say.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump quickly into historicity. And I will ask my co-host, Jim, to jump in if I get anything wrong here. But I want to make sure everyone understands this is not a historical retelling of the construction of the camp or the horrors within, or even how Rudolf Höss's home life and his career actually went. Although there are some touchstones within the film, including a couple of allusions to, an affair, or, well, you can't really call it an affair, but anyway, that'll come up later in the spoiler zone. But it is not a historical retelling. It really is a fictional account. And if you want to, because, I don't think, like all movies, Jim, I'm sure you'd agree, all these historical movies, they're about what's going on now. That Glazer and the book it was based on, Martin Amis, they weren't like, let us once again talk about Auschwitz. It's more, let's use Auschwitz to talk about us now. Would you, anything I'm missing there,
Yes.
Jim?
I don't think so. No. The Martin Amis book is and I'll maybe submit it in the comments below. I should do more of that. But he was on Writers and Company. They replayed an old interview with him that I listened to 2 weeks ago prior to the Oscars. And yeah, it's a different book. So this one's based on his book. There's a little bit more about the inner workings. There's some more focus on, I think, some prisoners or maybe a saboteur of some sort. I don't know, but
one of the Sonder
commandos,
I think, who was involved in the actual uprising.
Yeah, and so I think it turns out that
uprising.
I might read the book. I maybe not during the summer. I tend to read lighter things during the summer, but I might actually.
I think it's important, though, folks. This is only loosely based, like crazy loosely based. I even got the impression, Jim, when looking at the book, it's like, okay, they bought the rights, and then Glazer went, well, I don't want to do that, and they're like, well, we already own the rights, so. It's a great title.
Yeah.
Like loose may even be too strong a word.
Yeah.
Inspired
and
by.
Martin Amis passed away. I don't think he was part of the putting it together
Yeah.
either, but yeah, he passed away, I think the
Oh,
last year
several
or the
years
year
ago.
before.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah.
All right. Okay, let's get into this one. Let's I think it's time to get into the spoiler zone. Jim, my first question, and I guess it's more of a teaser, or not a teaser, a seed. Oh, Jesus, so many gardening metaphors are going to just automatically pop out of my mouth. But I'm wondering, want to know at the end why, or maybe we at least try and answer why we think the director wanted us to not just to tell the story of the family, but to put Rudy in as kind of a hero, or at least the protagonist.
Yeah.
And I certainly have some thoughts on that, and I'm sure you do. But why don't we, again, something we can answer later in the show.
Yeah.
But to start with, why don't you give us your first, your kind of, we're in the spoiler zone, but give us your top line review first.
Oh, I'd say a very a clinical look at a family operating, uh, beside a death camp, and concentrating more on itself than the world as a whole. Yeah, very cold and distant, but kind of horrifying.
Yeah.
Or not kind of horrifying, very, very horrifying.
Kind
Why do
of.
I always do that? The kind of.
I
No, definitely horrifying.
clinical, eh?
Clinical, yeah. Yeah, well, just
Oh, I'm not
the
asking you to
yeah,
justify it. I was
yeah.
more, but do you want to elaborate on what you mean by that?
Just a lot of, I was taking a look at it again, and the where the camera is still a lot of the times, there's a lot of scenes of constant household motion. This is the day to day of these
Yeah.
folks, and so there's not even a lot of there's a few arguments and a few scenes, but there's a lot of just people putting their head down doing their work. And I wrote in my notes, not even a lot of pleasantries. Like, there's not a lot of pleasantries between the husband and wife. There's no thank yous or pleases. I mean, this is, you do what you're told, even amongst some of the Polish household staff. And yeah, a lot of it's just that there's one shot of a prisoner. I guess the prisoners aren't allowed in the household. Just a dolly shot of him with a wheelbarrow, and it follows
Yeah.
him down the yard for about 30 seconds. So you're getting this idea of motion, and almost like a piece of machinery, kind of.
Yeah. Do you, it's interesting, actually. That's a great, that's an interesting take. Myself, I felt, I did feel cold, and you even see it in a lot of the imagery. Even when it's sunny, it never
Mm,
feels warm.
mhm.
Like they really kind of, accept the opening scene of this bucolic middle
Yeah.
class picnic at the lake. It isn't until you get to the next day and actually on at the house that all of a sudden the color temperature changes. And
Mhm.
so it could be a bright sunny day and it still feels like, well, sometimes here in winter it can be bright and sunny, but you're like, that looks cold outside.
Yeah. Yeah.
That sun
Yeah.
is bringing no warmth, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And you can tell it's midsummer. I mean, just by the plants and the way people are
Oh,
dressed and stuff. But yeah, there's not
mhm,
not summer in that sense of
yeah,
comfort kind of way.
yeah. So for myself, I I found, yes, it is observing it, but
Mhm.
it is in that slow, steady rhythms and, well, I'll get into tension in a little bit, but the rhythms of the thing and the rhythms of daily household life,
Mhm.
especially as the family goes, that you kind of, you're almost, you are not, maybe not forced, but you really are set up to feel for Rudy. Ugh. Even while and part of that tension is you're forever hearing there. I mean, it's the Oscars. All these awards are ridiculous. But I can't imagine any sound designer complaining that this film won an Oscar for
Mm,
best sound design, because
yeah.
the way it keeps the horrors out of frame and only in our ears.
Mhm.
And so that even when we see Rudolph Commandant reading books to his children or carrying them to bed and that, you're hearing these horrors. It's just out of earshot. It's just out of frame. It's
Mhm.
over the wall, and I and it builds tension. Even when we see the household staff, and I think that was very conscious that the household staff, no chit chat, no, it's
No.
attract no attention. I
Mhm.
don't think that was clinical. I think that was practical,
Mhm.
like a motivated character thing. The inmates who are the inmates, the prisoners who are working on in the house, or well, not in the house, you're right, in the field, like you see one scurry
Mhm.
to get the boots, to clean the boots, so the boots are
Mhm.
back in time for Rudolph to put his feet back in them. They were dirty before, they got to get cleaned. And he
Yeah.
scurries and he's very quiet. He goes and does his job, and then he brings them back and scurries back. And everyone's kind of a little bit stooped,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think, and yes, the the quote local girls in the house, and I'm putting big air quotes on that. Those local girls in the house, they're quiet and they've got a face because there's nothing you can do. There's no amount of uh kissing, or there's no chit chat. There's no, on one level, it's very German in that kind of, well, why am I communicating? You've been, the further east you go in Europe, the less it's like, well, I brought you your food. Why are we smiling?
Yeah.
You weirdo. But I think in this context, it's very much just keep your head down,
Mhm.
literally at times. Keep your head down, answer questions, volunteer nothing. Just,
There's even a scene where they have an argue the husband and the wife have an argument, and it
yeah, the
travels.
big
So
midpoint.
don't turn your back on me, and he runs into the house and
Mhm.
she follows him, and right in the young brunette, the youngest of the household staff, the Polish girl, is
Yeah.
sweeping up the hallway, and she just and you can
Anelia.
see her in profile with the
Yeah.
way she's lit, and she just
Oh,
goes almost like a statue. She goes like this with her, and
well,
are you guys
like a
fighting? Like no acknowledgement that there's
royal
a fight going on.
staff, or staff. It's staff in a big manor house or something.
Yeah, yeah,
It's,
yeah.
yeah, it's just, you know,
It could be Down
Mrs.
Abbey. No,
Hus,
I'm just kidding.
Marta, no, Mrs. Hus, no, Mrs. Hus, clean it up, because I'm mad.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Um, and so I wonder, I don't, for me, I thought it was cold because it's such a cold place,
Mhm.
not literally, but figuratively, but also it just builds that tension. You never, when you think of tense, I do think of coolness, coldness, hot, you got to think of another way of building tension,
Yeah.
and I think that just everything is designed to build tension, even though throughout the entire film, we never actually see any violence except I think it's basically the third act, as everything's in a way starting to fall apart for the Hus family, the, the Hus house.
Yeah.
the when is it Klaus shoves? Yeah, Klaus shoves Hans. The older boy shoves the younger boy into the greenhouse and is doing that. Tss, tss.
Yeah.
It's like, ooh. But that's the only violence I think we actually see in the whole movie, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's actually
Like
quite
we
the
hear
opposite of
it.
the Ray Fiennes kind of taking pot shots from the balcony kind of
Yeah.
commandant kind of and then, not to criticize that one, but
Mm.
it's a totally different take
Well, and a
on
different,
this.
but I think that comes down to a different purpose,
Yes, yeah.
you know? But let's get back to just the movie itself, though. Myself, like, cold or clinical, I was moved by this thing, but, and forgive me, this was mentioned to you yesterday at a different movie we watched. Um, See it or skip it to come out shortly, hopefully. Maybe I'll put a card here. Uh,
Sure.
the We're not given any catharsis.
No.
That tension is maintained. We get a little bit of a glimpse of hope, maybe, with the sunbeams play late in the third act
Hmm.
with the piano playing. But otherwise, it's just I don't know about you, Jim. I was constantly kind of going, okay, is this when we're gonna have an explosion of violence? Like some,
Yeah.
you know, when actually all we ever see, the most anger I think we even see is where, okay, maybe the most violent thing we see is when Hetty threatens the staff, but the closest we see to any
Yeah.
kind of violence, and I would say violence was done, even though no one's hitting anyone.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's that she finally decides to, pull the threat card, and it's in her all movie
Hmm.
long, but she says, I could have my husband take care of you and put your ashes in the fields of
I will give you the
Bibiche or
exact
whatever.
quote
Yeah.
because it's so
But
it is so fucking chilling. Whoop, that is
that's
not
not the quote.
so not what I was looking for. Here we go. It is so chilling. Uh, and her delivery, Jim. It's
Yeah, yeah.
Fuller's delivery as Hedwig. It's the I could have my husband spread your ashes across the fields of the beach, which I looked up, Mr. Chaboyko. I think I was
Hmm.
telling you this yesterday. I looked that place up. It is a big it's a small village outside of Auschwitz. I think that's how it's pronounced now.
Hmm.
The former Auschwitz. It's a field, and it's like, oh, that must have been where they were dumping a lot of ash as a fertilizer. Great for drainage.
Yes,
Um,
yeah.
but I think it was more chilling only because, and it goes back to that great sound design, just before the shot before is when she's, did you do that to taunt me, or it was something along the lines, did you leave this out to taunt me, the Hetty's mother's dishes,
Yeah.
and she's, no, Mrs. Sis, and we see her looking in that kind of, oh my God, I'm being seen. You have fight, flight, neither option. Third, freeze. And she freezes, and you just hear, you can see a little bit of it, and you hear the little bit of a rattle of the cup and saucer that the young girl's holding.
Hmm.
And then I could have my husband do this. It's like, and a pettiness, just
Yeah.
sheer pettiness. She's just mad, and it's like,
Lashing out.
someone's going to feel miserable,
Hmm.
Of course, I think about me getting pissed off that my nacho chips didn't come at the theater yesterday, and I go,
Yeah.
ugh, I'm not comfortable now. you know, like we've all gotten mad
Hmm.
because we're mad about something else. Well, I'm taking it out on you.
Yeah, yeah. I
Next
mean,
time,
if you
I think anytime I lose my cool that way, I'm getting, oh yeah. Okay, Hedwig.
Yeah. Likes these like or whatever.
Well,
Yeah.
well, I think that comes back to Jim, like why this family?
Mhm.
Why on the family?
Well, I think because you have the comparison of and you hear it too. There's one held shot of just Hess's head as a train is coming in, and you hear, and they don't translate any of it, but you can imagine, "Don't separate me from my son" kind of
Oh, at the
dialogue.
selection.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
selection, and they just show his head, and it sort of then clouds of smoke cover it, and the screen turns white. And on one hand, the families 100 meters that way are being torn apart and dissolved essentially, and he's trying to establish they recently had another one.
Hello.
They've got they're pretty happy with it, I think. So it's that another movie that we watched or that was up for Oscars, Killers of the Flower Moon, I think is in large part about compartmentalization, different in different ways, of course, but
Yeah.
bad people sort of compartmentalizing their lives in order to be their own hero, or not to feel bad, or to even function
Yeah.
properly.
Here, let me put this to you, because I did think of Killers of the Flower Moon.
Mhm.
And I even more so comparing these two, rightly so, as you described, and I was thinking about that myself. I was like, this is another reason why Killers of the Flower Moon is a weaker film done by the wrong filmmaker. Um, and it goes to what the filmmaker's interest is. And I think Scorsese, and this is no knock on his oeuvre and his interest, but he is really just interested in what motivates an individual,
Mhm.
to do what they do, and how they deal with it. Whereas I think Glazer's after much bigger game here.
Mhm.
The way I kind of described, Jim, I don't know if you'd agree with me. I've become such a story guy.
Mhm.
And the movies we cover are so story, we cover filmed stories, I think, is, we're
Yeah.
not big on the experimental, it's a tone poem.
Yeah.
We have yet to do a Terrence Malick film. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
but I do, in that context, if we accept that framework, it's like you've got your log line, what the film is about.
Mhm.
But I also think there's like that emotional, that potentially started to call the heart line, the what's the movie really about? And I think a couple of an example I've used is I did watch that Damsel,
Mhm.
and I think a lot of fairy tales like that, uh, they can be reduced down to it's really about a girl growing up into a woman. She's on the cusp of adulthood. She becomes an adult, and all the positive and negative that comes that way. My smart remarks was, a dutiful princess goes into the dragon's lair, an independent queen comes out.
Mhm.
Um, this one, though, and I think this kind of goes into what Glazer's really trying to do here, but the best way I could come up with it is it's a story about what one otherwise unremarkable everyman, and I capitalize that, is
Mhm.
willing to do for a nice house in the country. And I think that's why they're so. I, I put to you, if you're watching the movie honestly, people like this, you've met people like this, and perhaps to us all, I know I can't say I've been him, but I've been a
Mhm.
corporate drone, I was for 10 years, mid-level, chummed with the big shots, but no way could I ever approach the mayor to say, hey, I need a favor. I'm getting moved around.
Yeah.
Much like Rudy, I could
Mhm.
never do that at City Hall. But did I know the mayor? Just as Rudy knew Hitler? Sure.
Hey, Mayor, I have a letter from Martin Bormann here. I don't know where you got that, Rob.
Yeah. Yeah. and I think that's kind of why Glazer, he's going for a bigger game. It's not to, oh, who's this poor individual who did these terrible things and how he's. I think that's why we're focused on him and his family, and why the crime is always over a wall, and why it's always hidden, and why everyone scurries about to keep hiding it. Why they say if any SS member takes a lilac, all the coded language and everything is really
Mhm.
to make sure that we see him as a neighbor or as ourselves. That this is
Mhm.
somebody he's not. We're really good at going, oh, it's a nut. They were psychopaths. It was a small group.
Mhm.
Whereas in this film, it's just constantly weaved in. Everybody knew. Everybody was affected. Even the most, the mother,
Yeah.
when she saw, when she's watching and she's looking at the chimney, a
Mhm.
visual thing cue that keeps coming up, and you see the moment where she's, oh, actually, there you go. The only warm light other than sunbeams on the Polish girl, the only warm light we ever see is the warmth, the warm glow of the
Yeah. Which
crematoria
which
chimney.
is even too creepy for the mother-in-law. Like, finally, she's just like, "Nope, I'm out.
Yeah, I'm out, and obviously wrote something to Hedwig.
Not coming back." She
Yeah.
said, "You'll see these trees flower when you come back," and it was probably something like, "Yeah, I'm not coming back."
No, not those
We don't see
trees
the
are.
letter, but or the note, but
Yeah,
yeah,
but
yeah.
in all the action afterwards, it really is. It, Hedwig's Hedwig's moment is foreshadowing Rudy's later.
Mhm.
It's kind of her fall, and although we see her once more or a couple times after, we're really kind of done with her as a character.
Mhm.
It's now 100% Rudy's show. Um, but yeah, where was I going with that? Where did I start with that? Oh,
The
Everyman.
the
Yeah,
everyman, yeah.
that we are supposed to empathize and even a little rooting for Rudy as a corporate mid-level, middle management, not even a schmuck, a little
Mhm.
schlubby, but a middle management schmo, like even down to the corporate, very corporate meeting as they are discussing one of the, I can't believe I'm saying this, Jim, one of the worst episodes of the Holocaust, the expulsion in 2 months of over 400,000 human beings, 80% of whom murdered shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
2 months.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what does Glazer dwell on there? The standard. I've been at those tables. The standard. The guy gets a promotion, but he makes sure he kisses the ass of the guy who's announced it. Meanwhile, there's the guy doing all the hard work, going, "Oh, thank you," and it's like no one complimented you. You're not you're not the favorite here. So
Yeah.
like he's snubbed in this meeting and they're all bastards. So you're meant to kind of have a little sympathy for him, not to, like, I don't think Glazer's trying to play a trick on us there.
Mhm.
We're always reminded, we're
Yeah.
always aware of what's actually going on, whether it be the sound, the odd scurrying, the Hedwig's threat, the petty stealing,
Yeah.
the sorting of currency. So
Yeah.
here, the
On his
letter,
own desk, out in the
the
open.
reference letter, as he's trying to avoid a transfer, which
Yeah.
is like, it's just such an everyman. This wasn't. I think in this story, Glazer's like, no, he's us. I
Yeah,
want
I
you to
mean,
empathize with them because I want you to realize it's just too easy to be that schmuck on that side of the wall.
And you can argue that doing that would be, a pretty subversive act as a filmmaker.
Mm.
But also, there's the
Especially as
aspect.
a Jewish filmmaker,
Yeah.
because there's no, and I think he alluded to it. I did not see it. I didn't watch the Oscars, but apparently he was he either alluded or directly referred to what's going on in Gaza. You
Mhm.
know,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, no, he did talk about
yeah,
that.
yeah.
He said
So
he says they're using us to, further their own means, basically wildly paraphrasing, but
yeah, but
yeah.
so he's writing this. We should all feel as settler colonialists, or all let's say, Jim, you and I are settlers benefiting from an imperial colonialist project. That doesn't mean you and I are Rudolf Hess. That said, everyone, if you're in the West, you should be like, oh yeah, I wanna, as many crimes are committed so that this empty land could be here. And oh yeah, if you are a settler in the occupied territories, or someone who goes, oh, those poor people, you should, watching this movie should be, oh, I need to reassess, you know.
Yeah, I mean, further to that, on the wife's side, I mean, you're talking about Rudy being the functionary, but on the wife's side, there's a lot of that. She gets together in a little coffee club in the
Yeah,
mornings, and they bitch and they gossip about other women, and they
even over the
and there's
stuff
that
they're
sort of.
stealing.
Yeah, and there's
I'm sorry, they're
mean.
skimming, or they're perquisites.
I really like those set of curtains, and there's that Mean Girls aspect to it too. They're
Yeah,
even down to she finds some lipstick and a fur coat that she sort of absconded
key
with, and
moment.
she sort of she smells the lipstick
Yeah,
first, and then what surprised me is that she tried it
yeah.
on, because I would have thought that if somebody else touched it, how are the how literal do they take these things? And
Well, and
I
I think
think she
that's
kept
what's
the she
important.
kept the lipstick
Oh
eventually.
yeah, yeah, she tried it, but you don't wear that during the day.
Mhm.
But putting the perfume on, it's from France.
Yeah.
Well, how did it get to Auschwitz from
Yeah.
France?
So,
Oh, well, there's
what's
all
the
these trains
provenance
that
of
keep.
that
We're always
perfume?
getting a shipment. you know, I
Yes. Yeah.
I think that that's exactly it. They're all knee-jerk bigots. And even the mother,
Mhm.
before she has her moment, is going, "Oh, I don't know about the obviously the Jewish house she once worked in,
Mhm.
who knows what evil things they're talking about." It's what we see, whether it be in Winkler or Brandon or somewhere here in Winnipeg, or out loud down in the United States, all these crazy conspiracy theories about their chosen enemy, but most of them are just knee-jerk
Mhm.
bigots who see an opportunity. Because it also, I don't think Aliena or Marta, local girls my ass. They were selected, skimmed,
Yeah.
and yeah, Marta, I think, was reminded in when she was yelled at, you have a good living here. Like, it's just constant,
Yeah.
no matter how much shit you have to put up with, you're lucky, it's like,
Well, even Martin Amos in that interview commented on the fact that they accuse Jewish people of being, of being thieves and being
yeah,
acquisitive in a bad way, and just sort of keeping up with the Joneses and all that sort of gross stuff. And then he said, the irony is that the Nazis were far worse at what they accused the Jewish people of being. That they were, they were grifters. There was a grift to Nazism, and there's everyone was on the take, and you see this on the level of one single household, one
yeah,
which is conveniently next door to
yeah.
Auschwitz itself. But
Well,
yeah, it's kind of an interesting
but even in the
take.
one fight we see,
Mhm.
well, Himmler encouraged us, you know, because they're
Wasn't
worried
me.
about, because there was one thing that, like all these things that turned it into a big operation and legalistic, there'd be somebody going, oh, listen, we didn't kill millions, but you were employed, you were paid. How dare you steal?
Yeah.
Those gold teeth are meant to go to the war effort.
Yeah. 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 But you wanted to, you
What is
mentioned,
that envelope of cash doing on your desk when it should have been sent to the paymaster for appropriate
did you claim
legal?
taxes on this? Yeah. You were mentioning earlier the connection with gardening. All
Oh,
the
yes.
and even the movie poster is a big flower, and there's various shots of flowers, and they sort of
Yeah.
coalesce into a. There's a little bit of a not an
When he's a
intermission
busy
as much, but
bee.
the screen turns red,
Yeah.
and and later on, a scene that's in a lot of the trailers or even on the Oscar night coverage shows one of the outdoor workers pouring ash
Yeah.
on the gardens, and you think sort of the cost of this health. I mean, their garden, you see it growing over the season,
Yeah.
and it even after the husband left, I thought, you know, got transferred and the family stayed behind.
Yeah.
It even got a little too unkempt as it had been before. These things are growing well, and they're
Yep.
growing well because of the fertilizer,
It's
and
good.
the fertilizer is
Well,
humans.
well,
You know, and so
the
like
fertilizer, the drainage,
yeah, yeah,
and slave labor,
and even yeah, and but
because Hedwig
to
refers
what
to that.
to what cost this healthy
Yeah.
yard? You know, this is, and that's sort of
Yeah.
the horrors that you get these beautiful flowers from this horrible place, and yeah,
Well, and I wonder if part of it, like, because another thing that comes up, and it was certainly part of the program, and again, I don't think you can talk about this film without talking about Glazer being Jewish, being aware of the standard Israeli line of "we came to this land that was doing nothing," including a Canadian cabinet minister
in BC,
in
yeah,
BC talking about, well, nothing was really going on. The land wasn't being fruitful.
jeez, sounds like a real biologist.
And then in the same phrase, well, yes, there were several 100,000 people there, referring to the pre-1948, the
Mm,
Nakba's, the Nakba, or the catastrophe, as
mm.
Palestinians referred to it. Israelis talk about the fight for freedom. What, the freedom of the locals you pushed out of the way?
I believe we covered that in another movie.
Well, but this is, and again, I think that's why he emphasizes the everyman nature,
Mhm.
because isn't that Canada? Isn't that the United States?
Australia, New Zealand,
You know,
kind of
the
goes
only
on.
reason we're not talking about it as Mexico is because there's just too many.
Yeah.
And the Spanish had, it's like, well, no, we're more about the gold anyway.
Yeah, it's sort of, you think back, Shogun's playing right now, and you're like, "What, Japan? Why won't you let us in?" You're like, "Well, I got a few ideas along those lines. I can maybe back this up. Let me get this started."
Yeah.
First of all, the Japanese have a pretty good idea
Yeah.
of how they,
It's like, who knows? Maybe later on they find out, it's like, oh, well, thank God.
Well, we had 250 good years there, but
But actually, and that's you think about the Meiji Restoration, what triggered that was literally American gunboats going,
yeah,
you let us in, or well, something's coming in. You
yeah,
know, I have this, or
yeah,
like that. And so I do. I think that's why the family's so not schlubby. he's a bit of a schlub. She's stolid, but
Hmm.
the kids seem loved
Hmm.
until, things start to, it is a tragedy, maybe not quite in the Greek sense, but there's kind of a tragic arc, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I go when we were talking about heroes and protagonists. You can say that he's a far worse creature than, say, Tony Soprano. I don't think Tony Soprano's supposed to be, is what my wife and I discuss a lot, because she doesn't love gray area stuff, but which is pretty much all of the Sopranos. But whereas he's obviously not a good dude, but he's the focus, right? So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's an interesting take. I've heard arguments too, and I sort of wanted to ask you about this. They talk about it, and they've talked about it with Oppenheimer too, is that, well, you don't see the people that are truly affected. Uh, they have a presence on screen, but people are citing that as the fault. For me, what I think is that the
No.
hook is this is the hook
Yeah.
is that it's from the outside, is that the view
Yeah.
is from the outside. So if you and hook is a little bit of a sort of even a bit glib but
Yeah.
it's what it is. It's the vision of the movie to show it, from the estate side of
Yeah.
things,
Well,
and everything else sort of literally bleeds through.
yeah. Well, and I think it's yeah, I would even question, is that argument in good faith? You
Yeah,
know,
I didn't
I'm
like it before.
suspicious of it,
Mhm.
because any kind of open watching of this film, and I think one of the things you should be led to is, oh, the walls we will build, the lies we will tell ourselves to keep that. Well, that's over the wall.
Mhm.
That's over there. The Jews are over there in this new pleasant place we've put them in. you know, the the yeah, that's like you say, that ain't a bug. Let's say, instead of hook, we'll say that's not a bug, it's a feature. It's
Mhm.
on purpose,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
What are the crueler details? I've actually I've been to Auschwitz myself. I didn't
Mhm.
notice the if there were outbuildings there. I didn't notice them. You're pretty much in the camp, but they are two-story buildings. And
Yeah.
one of the crueler details, I think, and it's nothing draws your attention to it, but they're two-story buildings. From the second floor, you'd be able to see this family, as a prisoner. You'd have a clear sight
Yeah.
line to see their little pool parties and their outdoor banquets, and the children running around and playing, and yeah, that seemed to me just an especially cruel detail. That again, they don't draw any attention to it, but there's
Yeah.
windows in the prison there, and
Well, one of the darker stories that came out of this, the Hamas attack on Israel, and only in like it's like, oh, maybe we are in the darkest timeline, because only, you I guess some of the people were murdered. Yeah, it's murder, but they were, because they were at a big concert, literally, Jim, on the other side of the fucking wall that
yeah.
the Israelis have built. As they continue, they move the wall closer. The Palestinians are jammed in tighter. The settlements grow bigger. Let's have a concert. This isn't like it's just an innocent kibbutz. They're just trying to eke out an existence over this hard scrabble land. Off. You have a concert right outside. Woohoo! Yeah, yeah. They can hear it.
Yeah. Well,
I Yeah.
without even the proper security. I mean, the defense.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a whole other thing.
yeah,
But
that's a whole other, getting into the incompetence of it all. Although, mind you, you could kind of say it's like, look at some of the behavior in the movie, and I almost want to do a timeline because when he's all excited to go back, he gets this good news. I'm
Mhm.
going back home to their. That's that's end of 43 into 44. All the news coming out of the East is bad now,
Yeah.
and just as everyone knew what was going on in the East, it was maybe not an open secret, but everyone heard not just rumors, but hey, fuck, this is what we saw. This is, yeah, that's a bad place,
Mhm.
and yet he's like, great, get to go back, he's happy about it.
Mhm.
And I think that kind of goes to that sort of delusional, everything's fine. They're in their place. This will all get turned around. And so some of the reactions, even to the within Israel on, let's say, the center right, is like, oh, you incompetent boobs. And it's like, you know what? It's like, really? That's what you're complaining about now. I mean, sure, they're incompetent, but so are these idiots.
Yeah, yeah. Going back to the, remember the ash up your nose that you were cleaning out
Yeah.
after
Well,
that day on the water there. But
having to scrub the kids off, you
yeah,
know?
let me rinse your eyes. No,
Yeah,
I
no,
hate
well,
you.
the ring of ash on
Yeah.
the bathtub. It's like, ugh.
Oof.
All right, Jim, would you agree with me, though? This is another similarity between this and Killers of the Flower Moon. We don't really get in Killers of the Flower Moon that big hit that the bad guy goes to jail and
Yeah.
justice. We don't, this is even a more extreme version of
Mhm.
that. Well, at the same time, I wouldn't call us saying, oh, nothing, it's all just a disaster and everything. It's not nihilist, but that we don't see Huss's end. We don't even get, those statistics that sometimes will come up. We do
Yeah.
see these, future maids just doing a job,
Yeah.
cleaning up the museum. So you know things have changed for the good to a degree.
Mhm.
But why do you think, if you'd agree with me that we as the audience are not given a moment of catharsis in this,
Mm-mm.
why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think it's part of this trend. They sort of pulled their punch, not just with Killers of the Flower Moon, the way they ended it, but Anatomy of a Fall, which we just talked about a few weeks back, is kind of also the ending is soft and there's not any big sort of like, like A Few Good Men type of or Perry Mason kind of moments
Yeah.
for a courtroom thing. So this way, yeah, and you don't even. And I didn't think. I thought, is this the kind of movie where you're going to have like the writing on the screen? You mentioned statistics, but the
Yeah.
Rudolf Hess was eventually captured by the Polish authorities and
Yeah.
executed in 1947. You didn't even get that,
No. No.
and it just sort of, yeah, fades, and yeah, it focuses on the future, and it shows it shows the inner, the museum
Yeah.
portion and the folks cleaning
It's the only time we
museum.
actually see from inside the camp,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you
That's a
know?
good point. And being there, I remember seeing the cut off ponytails and how they still were in their plates in their tight little, you know, PLAIT, their little how they were, put together,
Yeah.
and they had turned gray over the years. And it's just so hard. All the glasses, the piles of
Yeah.
eyeglasses and suitcases and things. Um, uh, yeah, I read an account that said that this is Rudy's vision, that he's actually seeing this or he's getting some sort of prophecy. I don't think so. I think it was
Yeah.
just a glazer cut. He just went, he just did a fast forward and showed us what it was like today. I think maybe a reason for this is taking a look at it at the long lens.
Yeah.
Like years later, this mighty empire that was supposed to last 1,000 years lasted 12,
Yeah.
maybe, or 13,
And the schmuck who
10.
thinks he's going to his upper middle class life in
Yeah, nope.
Silesia,
Yeah, yeah.
whatever they're calling, that in the Lebensraum.
Mhm. So a lot of this stuff is, looking at it in the long lens, maybe Glazer's approaching it from
Yeah,
that longer timeline, that these things, the days fall, back then
yeah,
like they do today, but you know, uh, all the years later, 75 years later or whatever, yeah, their empire's dust,
yeah.
and the camp remains as a memorial.
Yeah.
But
Well, yeah, and those workers
more
didn't
locals.
local girls, but they don't look terrified.
No,
Cleaning, doing their thing. They don't look, you know. Um, Here's my pitch on it.
sure.
I think the reason we don't get any relief is probably closer to Killers of a Flower Moon versus Anatomy of a Fall. I
Mhm.
think Anatomy of a Fall, that's very much they're trying to maintain the tension of her guilt or innocence.
Mhm.
And so you don't get that moment because that would kind of lock that in. And they're not doing what was that movie? Was it Jagged Edge, Jim?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, Jagged Edge with
Jeff
Sharon
Bridges.
Stone and Mr. Douglas.
Oh no,
Um,
yeah. How am I forgetting
Like
this?
yeah, I think so. Anyway,
Yeah, the one with
regardless.
the skirt.
Yeah. Yeah, but well, yeah, Sharon Stone, but the guy, Jagged Edge. I'm sure it's Jagged Edge or
Jagged Edge is the Jeff Bridges one where he's represented by Glenn Close, I want to say,
right. Yeah.
and we're not sure if he's guilty or innocent until the end. I won't give it away, but it's another 1990s Jeff Bridges classic, which
Okay,
I
Sharon Stone,
was.
Mike Douglas, Basic Instinct.
That's it.
Yeah. Where they're like, well, she's got a knife under there. I think it's kind of obvious.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas these two films, we know they're guilty. We don't, it's not that. I think, I don't think it's as effective in Killers of the Flower Moon, but it's remarkably effective here. It's not pulling a punch. That's the whole thing. It's not even, you don't deserve it. You do not deserve catharsis.
Mhm.
This is a terrible thing that you could all do. Why the hell should you get to put it on the scapegoat? I don't mean Rodolphe Huss is a scapegoat, but
Yeah.
catharsis is, I guess the original Greek term was about an expelling, how the body can expel poisons, that the body has its own natural
Yeah.
processes of. And
Mhm.
so what do we see?
That
Him
leads into.
retching, but he can't get anything out.
Yeah.
He just retches. And then I kind of look at the hallways as almost did anyone see me
Mhm.
doing that? And that brief moment, and then it's like, is that moonlight? Oh wait, no, it's from inside. But I always saw those hallways as almost like everything's closing in on you, Rudy.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that we as the audience is supposed to, in a way, identify or go, oh, how am I like this terrible, terrible piece of,
Mhm.
because I'm a lot closer to him. And to have him get his comeuppance, to show it,
Mhm.
would be to let us off the hook. And I
Yeah.
think going back to that hook is that, yeah, Glazer's like, no, take it out yourself. Physician, heal thyself.
Mhm.
He's doing it on purpose, and that
Yeah.
is the punch. You don't get relief. The fight, you don't get that. You're stuck there.
Mhm.
Going, whoa, wait a second. Isn't this all his fault? And
Yeah.
and then coming back to, this is why I distrust the argument and good faithness of that argument of, well, they're not talking about the real, what about the poor victims? It's like, yeah, you want to talk about the victims because you don't want to really talk about the perpetrators and how regular they were,
Hmm.
and even like coming down to Hedwig's such a great character. And yes, it's like I get that she did a great performance in Anatomy of the Fall, but I think this is way better. So much better, especially as playing a petty kind of as somebody who you get the impression it's like, oh, maybe the future wasn't looking so good for Hedwig,
Mm.
and then all of a sudden things changed. That bad marriage she made when she was a kid, perhaps where Klaus is from. And there's one,
Yeah.
oh, you really landed on your feet.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get this idea, and it's like, these are people we could know.
And there's a couple of scenes where she's just kind of carefree. You get the impression that she's sort of laughing in bed, and
Yeah,
nothing
a
much is troubling her.
a loving relationship.
Eddie. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, you smell nice.
Yeah.
It's from France.
Yes.
But they're having a genuine human moment.
Hmm.
And I think, yeah, to for them to get their comeuppance, for us to see that is for us to be let off the hook. They were bad,
That's
justice prevailed. It's all good now. I
yeah.
mean, you and I, and I'll put a link in a pinned comment. I sent you the story of the Sunbeam song,
Yeah.
um, and how that poor man, after surviving Auschwitz, ends up killing himself years later, thinking that all his efforts were for naught.
Hmm.
Um, while, you know, some of these pieces of got compensated,
Yeah.
lived their lives. I think the
Managed
quote was planting their
breweries.
gardens,
Yeah.
because Germans love their gardens. And all I can think of, I have some wonderful German friends. I've spent time in German gardens and they are lovely. And I think that's part of the whole purpose of this is like, oh, they're all lovely people. And it's the lovely people you got to be frightened of.
Yeah.
That'd be you, in the seats.
Before we sign off, I
Oh,
was
yeah, we
wanting to
are.
bring this part up. Is the we hadn't even touched on this part
Just you're
yet.
like trying to hustle it along, Jim.
No, no. Well, I figure we're coming up to an
Yeah,
hour
no,
almost,
we're
but the right at about the 20, 25 minutes, half hour mark, we're it's nighttime, and Rudolph is putting his kids to bed, and where everything
oh,
changes. The screen changes. You get
yeah,
this thermal imaging camera. Everything. It's like a negative
yes.
view,
The
literally a film negative
yeah,
view of things,
it's
and the
actually
soundscape change.
heat.
Uh, Heat, yeah,
Yeah,
thermal
it's all
imaging
thermal
camera,
imaging. Yeah.
and it follows the progress of this young woman. I won't say little girl, and she's planting food for the prisoners to
Yeah, she's
find in the
obviously
morning.
like a young teen,
Yes,
you
yeah,
know,
probably
um,
on a bike.
yeah,
You
on a
know,
bike, dressed like the little German girls
yeah,
are. Like,
mhm,
I think on purpose, like very much the ankle socks and the little shoes, and it's like,
yeah.
yeah,
And a lot of initially I thought, well, that's a big swing. That's really quite different from something that was so such a controlled piece at the
yeah,
start, and you get into this, and you're boom, and I was just I was like, in a good way, I was like
yeah.
jumping out of my skin, like I was like,
Oh, but
holy cow, this is such
the
an effective thing.
tension.
Yeah, the
I'm like,
huge tension,
it,
and you're able
and
to
we
see
only see her
something.
twice,
Yeah,
you know?
and you see it from another person's point of view,
Yeah.
um, and not a prisoner, but a local.
But the same kind of
And
camera angle, though, Jim.
yeah,
The same
yeah,
kind of camera. But I think just as you're saying that, and I want to get this out or I'll fucking forget, because it just dawned on me. What have we been talking about? Cold and clinical, the
Mhm.
color temperature, that in the bright sunlight, everything feels cool.
Mhm.
Whereas, and I think that's why he's using the thermal imaging, because the bright heat
Mhm.
coming off, although we don't feel it, it's only at the end with sunbeams and the song and the
Yeah.
playing, and you're like, I think she's gonna be safe. That you grab any warmth. And I think that's part of like a visual cue that we
Yeah.
don't even know is acting on us.
And even to, a lot of people mention that segment, they don't mention the fact that you overhear some prisoners, and it's part of the only background dialogue that they have subtitles for,
Yeah,
fighting over an apple, and it
yeah,
leads to the death of one of the prisoners. So even
yeah,
even that's cursed. The
yeah.
flowers are cursed, good deeds are cursed, and it just makes it a little more complicated. But you do have this act of bravery, and
And
empathy
decency.
and decency,
Yeah.
and with using things that you wouldn't normally like. That's the kind of like screen gets dark and you
Oh,
get ominous sound, usually indicates a villain. For me, what I think it
and how we
is that,
can how clear, and how we can see her
yeah, yeah.
even as she's scurrying about trying to do this good and incredibly dangerous thing.
Mhm. And what I took from that was that it was somebody else. It was not an alternate reality. For me,
No.
it was
Oh,
somebody else's reality, but one that's almost based on sheer terror and consequence,
yeah.
rather than the lives of these
Yeah.
people, these, oh, my scrambled eggs were runny, you're in trouble kind of
Well,
thing.
I think I mean, it comes back to the, although I think there's more going on with that using heat to see her where everything else is cold, even though we're seeing it in the light of day and bright sunlight.
Mhm.
Um, we also are denied the ability, because we can't really see her face, even in the moment at the end, we are denied, and I think rightly so, we're denied the ability to put ourselves in her shoes. We
Mhm.
feel for her. Like I just like it's like, I don't want the little girl to die. Like
Yeah.
I'm getting choked up now.
Yeah.
But because we can't make that connection, we don't get to go, "Oh, I'm with her." It's no, no. Forget it, everyman. There's only a handful of people who had the guts to do that. And
Yeah.
yes, some of them were children. Probably isn't you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then
No.
even
Great.
at the
Great.
end, when we get sunlight on her, it's
Mhm.
masking her,
Mhm.
just like it's that backlit masking. We see the reverse when we see her at night doing her good deeds, and then she's giving life to this song, which really was written by an actual Holocaust survivor.
Yeah.
And we get to see that, but she's backlit. And
Mhm.
it's like it's the only person that the sun likes. And rightly so. It's like, oh well, I think she's warm.
Yeah.
We're all freezing to death. But she gets the warmth of doing a good deed at
Yes.
great personal risk. Yeah,
Alexandra, I think her name was.
yeah, yeah. Ugh, yeah.
Yeah. So, zone of interest.
All right, Jim. I
Ooh.
did ask a question at the beginning, but before we do that, I want to ask you, do you have any question you would like to ask Mr. Jonathan
Oh,
Glazer? On the off chance that I actually cut this appropriately so that it goes out and maybe we can get it answered, what would you ask Mr. Glazer?
hmm. Yeah, I would ask him. Oh boy, that's a good. I had
Here,
other
tell you what, I'll
notes
give you a
down.
minute
Sure,
and
yeah.
I have a
What would?
question.
Sure.
I have a question for Mr. Glazer. If we're so fortunate to get this one answered, I would like to know who he referenced, if anyone, or what films he referenced as he was building as he was thinking about working on how he's going to build the tension in this film, because in the whole movie, I just felt like I was being manipulated by a master, an absolute master of tension. And yeah, I'm like, okay, who was the inspiration? What did he look at? What was he thinking about when he was thinking, I've got to build tension here?
Mm.
Or did I
Yeah.
really misread the film that badly? He's going, tension? The last thing you're supposed to feel is tension, you idiot.
Yeah.
All right,
I guess,
Jim, do you have a
yeah,
question for Mr.
I,
Jonathan Glazier?
I do. At the start of the movie, where most movies start, there's a 3-minute pre-intermission. Pre-intermission, I don't know. It's about 3 minutes of music and a dark screen.
Almost
Uh,
his homage to the beginning of 2001: A Space Odyssey. Yes.
or movies from the olden days that used to start off that way.
An orchestral.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's just literally a blank screen, and it is 3 minutes, give or take a few
Yep.
seconds. I did time it. What was his thinking behind that?
Yep.
Was it merely a setup to? Was it a sound setup? Was it to tenderize you so you're set for the sound, or am I reading too much into that?
Oh, that's a great question.
Almost
And
like a tuning
you may
fork.
have
It's
even
just like,
answered it. I like that. Yeah,
yeah.
because it perks up your ears.
Mhm.
It gets that sense warmed up. So that may have very well been what he was doing. Or, well, we'll have to put that out onto the internet, and maybe we'll get an answer. We'll cast that digital bread upon the internet waters.
Jonathan
And
Glazer
maybe
called
we'll
us
get
wankers or something. We wake up on Monday morning.
I wonder, Jim, and I guess this would be my other question. Another thing he does in this film, so at the beginning, solid black screen. At the end, solid black screen.
Mm.
And at a couple of key breaks, so at the I think it's right around the beginning of the second act. He's
Mhm.
at the selection, and then it goes to a solid white screen and also sound cues.
Mhm.
And where is it?
The red in
Nearing
the
the
flower.
end of the second act, I would
Mm.
say, moving into the third, there's a red, or maybe it's more after the midpoint, but there's a clear red block. And I was like, okay, it may be just that I'm just not overreading, or I'm like, I would really just like that itch scratched. It's like, okay, what was the point of that? But I'll put that question to you, Jim. What do you think the
Mm.
point was with that?
Yeah, again, I think it's just him. He takes his time with this movie. I mean, he's
He
not
does.
clearly not in a rush for anything.
Although only
So
105
I think
minutes.
it's,
Hello,
yeah,
Mr. Scorsese, Denis Villeneuve.
yeah.
It's like, don't give me your fucking bull about world building.
I mean, if you think about it on one level, and this sounds ridiculous as I'm saying it, the black, white, and red make you think of a certain kind of uniform, perhaps. But
Oh,
I don't know.
you know what? That ain't perhaps a symbol
Yeah, I
with
don't know.
some straight lines and some angles and a circle and a field.
But
Oh,
that seems a bit simplistic for what I think for what he usually goes for. But I'd be interested in hearing that as
well, maybe
well.
that's why he kind of pulled back on it, because
Mhm.
what we do see, that is interesting, Jim, because we do see a couple of swastikas.
Mhm.
Uh, I think maybe the only two other, unless
One on a
except when it
child.
was an Oranienburg.
Mhm.
It's all very small, very pulled back. When most of these movies, it's just flags everywhere.
Full on, yeah.
And on the little
Val
girls in their young German girls' uniforms.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, if memory serves, they were wearing swastika armbands, but
yeah.
I'm not 100% sure of that.
The
I'll have
son
to
was the son had
confirm.
a full
Yeah.
on uniform on. The
Well,
older
when he was
son at one point, yeah.
torturing his kid brother.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's like the little
Appropriately
black shirt.
dressed. Yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna say we're going into final thoughts here because that's what we're doing, and I want to ask you the question that I started the show with. Uh, why do you think the he chose this family? Why do you think that's why we were, you know, yeah, why do you think he chose this family, and why it's this family and it's Rudy as the protagonist?
Yeah, I think historically it's the people that were closest, to the workings of the camp, while maintaining their. I mean, they literally lived. They were the next door neighbors, right? And
Yeah,
I think it's a reflection in that sort of comparison of the intact family versus the ones that were not allowed to be intact anymore. That's probably one of the arms of it, I
as good
imagine.
German settlers.
Mm,
So creepy and so uncomfortable.
yeah.
As a couple of Canadians who have benefited from many terrible things in the past, including our including imperialist colonialism. Um, okay, what do you think is the I think the way I talked earlier about, what I thought the emotional log line was this, how far will an everyman go
Mhm.
for a nice house? Um, but I think there are other kind of themes and, big questions. We do see, and it is interesting, we're sort of telegraphed his comeuppance, but I think only Hedwig actually where you see her kind of, get heart punched by
Mhm.
her own mother, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
rightly so. I'm not by that point, you have no sympathy for Hedwig, and if you had any little bit left, well, then she threatens poor
Throws the litter in
Ella.
the fire, and
It's
yeah.
like, "Jeez Louise."
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think about lying. I mean, the settler colonialism and what's going on in Gaza, but you could say the United States, Canada, like Australia, New Zealand, you know. I mean, that's I'm not saying obvious, but certainly comes forefront in anyone's mind, any reasonable person. But there's other things going on here. I mean, I wonder it kind of, puts the lie to the whole, "I was just following orders." It's like, well, I don't know.
You're
And
pretty
taking your little
ambitious.
land and, you know, fighting the transfer, the,
Mhm.
uh, you know, also, of course, in the building walls, how quickly can we wall off that horror that we're participating in to be able to say, "Well, that's over there. I don't know. Hey, I'm just living my life here."
Yeah.
But is there anything else I'm missing here? Like,
I mean, I think we touched on the main points. The discussion of the how industrial to make
mm,
the crematoria was pretty
yeah,
chilling. How long will this take to burn
yeah.
the
Well,
material?
and then it's
Just
in
like
a, oh, hey, but even that'll cool down so that while you're loading up one load, ugh. Yeah, no, you're right. What
yeah.
about, and this is just like a bullet point I wrote down, Jim. I'm not in a lot of these things. Like, well, we got to shield the children. It's one of the few times you see him angry at his staff. I mean, it's only through dictating a memo, which also I think is just genius.
Mhm.
But he's like, you're all getting sloppy. Don't do that. The whole and also going back to that gardening motif, lilacs, lilac bushes, the beautification for all, blah blah blah. You know,
Yeah.
because part of his job is efficiency. Yes, kill these, but we have to have laborers, and he's got a quota to meet in both dark ways.
Mm.
Um, but that lying doesn't work. Everybody knows. Everybody knows, even the children who, he was really kind of, oh my goodness, my kids are here.
Mhm.
I can't let them see this. But, you see poor little Hans there as somebody's getting shot. It wasn't the apple, I think, that time, but it was something else. And he
Yeah.
actually starts and he's talking to his little toys and he's, well, don't do that anymore. Don't do that again. And you're like, you feel for the little bugger. So, much like the little girl, that's the only other kid where I'm like, "Oh, the poor little bastard," you know?
Mhm.
Um, but you see the older one, Klaus, like, I mean, he turns into a little, well, he's playing with teeth before and
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
play acting, shoving someone into a gas chamber, like,
And apparently he was pretty bad in real life too, with the household staff and
mm,
threatening them even at his age,
yeah.
if I remember correctly. So
Well, and
yeah.
that's like, I mean, how it contaminates
Oh, and the
everybody.
daughter's sleepwalking, because she's
Yeah.
obviously troubled, and
Mm, yeah.
there's that one great shot where you're talking about the deaths of even children here, and he's the ceremonial shutting off of all the lights in the house,
Yep.
and he goes up and he looks over, he shuts it off, and he turns it on again because he sees a little specter in the corner. It's his
Another
daughter who
little
can't sleep.
girl backlit by a warm light,
Yeah,
except this is the flames.
almost like a horror movie shot too, but not.
No,
Definitely not.
well, this is going back to my question. I'm like, what masters of horror has he followed? I mean, this isn't his first movie with disturbing,
Mhm.
what's the one with Scarlett Johansson?
Under the skin.
Yeah, Under the Skin, which is almost like it was kind of a weird anti-horror film.
Hmm.
Um, But this one, that was another one where after a while the tension would build as you're like, "Oh, buddy, you're done for."
Sexy Beast.
Pardon?
Maybe Sexy Beast. He did that one as well.
Yeah, there.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, another. Yes, like I mean, it's he's been doing this for a while, but I kind of want to know. It's like, okay, what were your greats that you
Mhm.
were riffing off of?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ugh. Well, Jim, on that note, I will add one thing.
Sure.
I was before, folks, before I put before we had to get started here and I even pushed to 5 minutes, I was putting the final touches on a recap. And I think that's something, hopefully Jim and I, well, I'm going to say Jim and I, hopefully I'll have my crap together for next week's show, but we're going to try and make a recap video of the movie and the key beats and everything, so that if you're going to join one of our conversations or you're listening to it after the fact, you can go to the recap to kind of refresh yourself without having to rewatch the whole movie. Of course, think of it like a Cole's Notes up here in Canada or Cliff's. Well, I don't even know if we have those anymore. Cliff's Notes. I don't know what the British version is, but
Yeah.
it's not meant to, oh, I don't have to watch the movie now. It's more meant to refresh and hopefully focus you on the right areas so that when you're engaging in a conversation like this, whether it be for our show or I don't know, for school or whatever, that you can maybe, my goal for that, just like our goal for this show, is that you have not just a better understanding of the movie, but a better understanding of why you react to it, and maybe a deeper appreciation. And so a deeper reaction to the film as you understand it more and it gathers more layers and you feel it a bit more. Because I do think art is and film does such a good job to pull us through emotions that we otherwise wouldn't necessarily experience and to think about things in different ways. So yes, I will put a link to that once I actually produce it. I'll put a link to that here. And of course, in the pinned comment, Jim will send me that link and we'll make sure that's in the comment, or he'll put a comment to that Martin Amis interview. And yeah, I think, Jim, I think that's about it.
Sounds good.
Why don't we wave goodbye on this?
With that said, happy St. Patrick's Day.
Thanks
All
for
right.
watching, especially if you made it here. Please like and subscribe.
See you,
Bye.
folks.